Beyond the Gates spoilers tease that Nicole Richardson's life is about to fracture under the weight of long-buried secrets. The first thread of unraveling comes from her husband, Ted Richardson, whose calm exterior conceals years of deception that go deeper than Nicole ever imagined. For years, their marriage had seemed stable, maybe even ordinary, but that illusion shatters when Nicole stumbles upon unsettling evidence that forces her to reevaluate everything: the identity of her son, the integrity of her husband, and the fragility of her own sense of truth. The catalyst for Nicole's descent into this emotional labyrinth is her discovery of a dead body. The victim is identified as Kenny, a man she had never known, yet now could not stop thinking about. The timing and location of the corpse are suspicious, but what truly disturbs Nicole is the chain of implications that lead back to her husband and her son, Martin Richardson. Martin had always been a quiet child, emotionally distant and often unpredictable, but Nicole had chalked it up to adolescence. She had no idea he had done something so damaging 2 years prior. Kenny's body isn't just evidence of a tragedy, it's a door opening into a darker dimension of her family's history. Nicole, acting on a gut instinct, begins to pry into Ted's past, her maternal intuition screaming at her that her son is inextricably involved. Her suspicions are confirmed in subtle ways: Ted's anxious glances when the case is mentioned, the defensive shift in Martin's posture when questioned about anything remotely connected to the woods near where Kenny was found. The tension in the house thickens with every passing day. But what sets Nicole off completely is her realization that both Ted and Martin are not just hiding something, they're hiding everything. Conversations turn vague, stories don't align, and eventually, she can no longer tell if she's losing her grip or if everyone around her is gaslighting her into silence. She reaches a tipping point. Nicole doesn't just suspect foul play. She believes her son and husband killed Kenny. And now every smile Ted gave her, every promise Martin made, feels like a betrayal draped in civility. Nicole confronts them both, but neither Ted nor Martin admit anything directly. Their silence is its own kind of guilt. Nicole threatens to go to the police to expose them. But doing so would mean tearing her family apart and possibly putting her own child behind bars. The moral calculus is unbearable. She is caught between justice and self-destruction. With no clear path forward, Nicole seeks out the one person she never thought she would turn to, her former brother-in-law, Bill Hamilton. She tracks him down and demands answers. Her tone is accusatory, bordering on manic. She somehow thought Bill is connected to this whole mess. She accuses him of standing by while a man was killed, of being a coward who let things go too far. But Bill isn't the easy villain she hoped he would be. He listens to her outburst without flinching, waiting until she's exhausted herself before responding. What he says doesn't calm her. Instead, it deepens the pit in her stomach. Bill claims he was the one who saved Martin Weiss. He says that 2 years ago, Martin had been on the brink of doing something irreversible, and Bill had intervened. The second time was more recent, tied again to Kenny. Nicole demands to know what he means, what exactly he saved Martin from. Bill doesn't answer right away. He studies Nicole for a long moment and finally tells her something that cuts deeper than anything else: Martin may not be her son. According to Bill, Martin is the biological child of Ted and Leslie, Nicole's former best friend and Ted's mistress. The affair had been long, secretive, and destructive. Leslie had passed away a few years earlier, and Ted had convinced Nicole to raise Martin as her own, never revealing the truth. Nicole reels from the blow. Her sense of identity, already cracked, begins to shatter. She accuses Bill of lying, of manipulating her, but he stands by his claim. She demands to know what else he's hiding. Bill only replies that the secrets don't end there, and that if she wants real answers, she needs to go to Ted. The implication is that Ted has been orchestrating this deceit for decades. Nicole explodes. She screams that Bill is just as guilty as Ted and Martin, complicit in every dark secret. She calls him a coward for not coming forward sooner. Bill, pushed beyond his limit, slaps her. The moment hangs in the air, thick with mutual betrayal. Nicole stares at him, stunned, but not broken. She promises him she will get revenge, not just on Ted and Martin, but on Bill too. She will expose everything, no matter what it costs. And then she walks away. Her steps are shaky, but her resolve is not. Behind her, Bill watches in silence, perhaps realizing that in trying to protect Martin, he may have doomed them all. Nicole begins to dig. She pulls out old documents, visits Leslie's grave, searches for any clue that might confirm Bill's story. The pieces begin to fall into place with a horrifying clarity. Medical records that never quite made sense. Ted's overprotectiveness toward Martin. A strange letter she had found months ago that she had dismissed as a prank. Every overlooked detail comes back with fresh meaning. Her relationship with Martin becomes more strained. She can no longer look at him the same way. He senses the shift and grows even colder, more withdrawn. When she tries to talk to him, he shuts down, repeating that he didn't mean to, and that Kenny wouldn't stop. These cryptic confessions send chills down Nicole's spine. What had Kenny done? And why had Martin reacted with such violence? Ted, meanwhile, refuses to answer any of her questions directly. His defense is always the same: it was complicated. But Nicole doesn't want complicated. She wants the truth. And as she pushes further, she begins to suspect that Kenny's death wasn't spontaneous. It was planned, perhaps even necessary from their perspective. What if Kenny had been blackmailing them? What if he knew the truth about Martin's parentage? Or worse, what if Kenny was somehow involved in something that made him a threat to Martin in the first place? Nicole's paranoia deepens. She starts recording conversations, hiding evidence, preparing herself for the inevitable confrontation. She knows now that she can't trust anyone. Her family is a house of cards built on lies, and it's starting to collapse. And yet, amid the chaos, Nicole begins to change. Her fear curdles into anger, and her anger becomes strategy. She stops reacting and starts planning. She will not be the last to know, the last to act. Whatever secrets Ted is still keeping, she will unearth them. She will tear apart every layer of deceit, expose every hidden motive. Because Nicole has realized something chilling. The greatest danger isn't what her family has done. The real danger is what she's willing to do to get justice. And as she stares into the abyss they created, she knows she may never come back the same. But she doesn't care anymore. All that matters is the truth. The storm Nicole stirred was only the beginning. With every step forward, she found herself deeper in the web of lies Ted had spun for years. Confronting him again was no longer a matter of curiosity or justice, it was war. She returned home late one night, not to argue but to hunt. She rifled through old drawers, breaking open the locked metal box under the bed Ted had forbidden her to touch. Inside were photos, dozens of them of Ted and Leslie. Some recent, some going back years. One picture showed a much younger Martin, maybe 9 or 10, standing next to Leslie while Ted stood in the background, a hand on Leslie's waist. The smile on his face was not of a friend. It was possession. The truth sat in Nicole's hands, undeniable. Martin had never been hers, not really. She had been a surrogate mother to a child created from betrayal. It wasn't just that Ted had lied, it was that he had forced her into a life built entirely on falsehoods. Her fury simmered beneath the surface, cold and strategic. Nicole decided to confront Martin, but not with rage. Instead, she approached him quietly in the kitchen the next morning. He sat with his usual bowl of cereal, eyes locked on the table. Nicole asked him softly what he remembered about Leslie. Martin's hands froze. He didn't answer directly, but asked a question instead: if someone hurts someone who's bad, is it still wrong? That was the moment Nicole's blood turned to ice. He wasn't asking for moral advice. He was looking for justification. Martin wasn't confused. He was haunted. She asked him what happened with Kenny. Martin stared at her, lips trembling. He said he knew. About me. That I wasn't supposed to exist. That he'd tell everyone. He stopped there. Nicole didn't push further. She had heard enough. Kenny hadn't just been some unfortunate victim. He was a threat, and Martin, possibly with Ted's help, had neutralized him. Martin wasn't a monster, but he was broken. And Nicole understood now how far the adults in his life had gone to keep him together, including Bill Hamilton. Nicole's anger at Bill softened only slightly. She called him again, demanding more truth. Bill refused to speak over the phone. They met at a gas station outside town, and Bill arrived looking older than ever. "I didn't just save Martin," he said. "I saved Ted. Twice. Once when he was going to lose everything after Leslie's death. The second time after Kenny." Nicole pressed him for details. Bill confessed that Kenny was Leslie's brother Martin's biological uncle. After Leslie died, Kenny grew unstable, blaming Ted for her death, claiming he'd manipulated her until she was nothing. Kenny came back into their lives threatening to expose everything unless Ted gave him custody of Martin, or at least paid him off indefinitely. Ted refused. Kenny began showing up at the house, stalking Martin from afar, leaving threatening notes. Nicole had seen the signs but hadn't understood them then. One night, it escalated. Martin disappeared for hours. When he returned, his hands were bloody. Ted cleaned him up. The next day, Kenny vanished. Bill was brought in to help cover the tracks. He found Kenny's body in a remote part of the woods, half buried, claw marks on the arms, face contorted in fear. Martin hadn't used a weapon. He had attacked Kenny with his bare hands. Nicole listened in horror. Bill told her that Ted had wanted to go to the police, but feared Martin would be taken away, institutionalized, or worse. They buried the body instead, faked a trail that suggested Kenny had left town. That lie, Bill said, had bought them peace. But only for a time. Nicole stood there in stunned silence, torn between maternal instinct and moral obligation. She asked Bill why he hadn't told her sooner. His reply cut through her, "Because I knew what you'd do." The damage was done. Nicole could no longer pretend her family was salvageable. That night, she returned home and told Ted she wanted the truth from him, directly, no more half-answers. Ted, exhausted and cornered, finally opened up. He admitted to everything: the affair, the secret child, Kenny's blackmail, and the plan to cover it all up. But there was more. Ted revealed that Leslie had died under suspicious circumstances. Officially, it was an accidental overdose, but Ted had always suspected Kenny played a part. Leslie had tried to cut ties with him before she died, and in her last voicemail to Ted, she said, "If something happens, it's because I told him the truth." Nicole realized then that the entire chain of events from Leslie's death to Kenny's murder was an avalanche started by one man's obsession with control and another's refusal to let go. And now Martin was the one buried under all the weight. That night, Martin attempted to run away. Nicole found his window open, his room empty. He had taken only a backpack and a photo of her, the only mother he had ever known. She called Bill, who began searching the outskirts of town. Ted, frantic and guilt-ridden, joined them. Hours passed. They found Martin near the lake, shivering and half-drenched. Nicole approached slowly, kneeling in front of him, telling him that no matter what, he was her son. Not by blood, but by choice. Martin wept. But it wasn't over. Nicole still had a decision to make. If she went to the police, Martin could be charged as a minor, but still face serious consequences. Ted and Bill would face conspiracy charges. The entire family would implode publicly. If she stayed quiet, she'd be complicit in a murder and a cover-up. She chose neither. Instead, Nicole began gathering evidence, building a case quietly, not for law enforcement, but for herself. She wanted the full picture, not just pieces. She needed control again. As she dug, she uncovered more than she expected. She found emails between Ted and Leslie that predated Martin's birth, emails discussing the project. The language was cold, clinical. Ted had convinced Leslie to have the baby not out of love, but as part of a plan to create stability in his personal life. Martin had been a solution to a problem, a tool. Nicole also uncovered bank transfers from Ted to a clinic overseas. The dates lined up with Leslie's final weeks of life. The amount suggested something far more than medical expenses. Nicole began to suspect that Leslie's death wasn't an accident. Maybe it had started with Kenny, but had Ted finished it? When she confronted Ted with the bank records, he denied nothing. He admitted that he had paid Leslie to stay quiet about Martin's parentage and their relationship. He claimed the payments were to help her relocate, not to harm her. But when pressed about the voicemail Leslie had left him before her death, he refused to say what it meant. Nicole realized then that some answers would always remain hidden. She left him that night, took Martin, and walked out. She didn't go far, just to a motel on the edge of town. Enough distance to breathe. Bill came by the next morning with a grim expression. He told her that Ted was planning to leave the country. The clinic was just the beginning. Ted had bought property overseas in Leslie's name, suggesting he may have always had an escape plan. Nicole filed for legal guardianship of Martin under her own name, independent of Ted. Bill helped her with the paperwork. Ted tried to fight it, but he had no legal claim. The DNA test Nicole ordered came back. Martin was not hers biologically. But the judge ruled in her favor, citing emotional and parental bonds over bloodlines. Still, Nicole knew Ted wouldn't stop. He'd come back. He'd manipulate. He'd threaten. She needed to end it. She arranged one last meeting. A final confrontation at the lake where they had found Martin. Ted arrived, as expected, guarded and weary. Nicole gave him a folder with everything she had, the emails, the transfers, the photos. She told him she wouldn't go to the police, not yet. But if he ever came near Martin again, she would bury him in evidence. Ted looked at her and said something that chilled her to the bone. "He's still my son." "Nothing changes that." Nicole responded with only one sentence. "You lost that right the day you made him a weapon." She left Ted standing there and never looked back. Over the following months, Nicole began to rebuild. Martin entered therapy, slowly confronting the trauma he had inherited. He didn't talk about Kenny often, but when he did, it was with a mixture of guilt and confusion. He remembered flashes, not the whole picture. Nicole didn't push. She was just there. Bill became a reluctant guardian uncle. His role in the past couldn't be erased, but he stayed present, making amends in action if not always in words. Nicole kept her distance emotionally, never forgiving him fully, but accepting that his help now was necessary. 1 year later, on the anniversary of Leslie's death, Nicole visited her grave for the first time. She brought no flowers, only the truth. She whispered to the headstone, "He's safe now. And I'm no longer your shadow." Back home, Martin was waiting. They didn't say much. But that night, Nicole sat beside him as he fell asleep, watching his chest rise and fall, wondering if peace would ever be permanent. She didn't know. But for now, the gates had closed behind them. And in the silence, she began to breathe again. Months passed, and the illusion of calm returned to Nicole's life, but only on the surface. Martin settled into a routine school, therapy, quiet weekends, and the quiet rhythm helped. But Nicole knew better. What they had survived didn't vanish. It lingered in glances, in the sudden tension when the phone rang, in Martin's eyes when a stranger lingered too long nearby. Trauma left footprints in their lives, and Nicole followed them with silent vigilance. One afternoon, a letter arrived. No return address, just her name scrawled on the front in hurried handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper with 4 words, "You don't know everything." Nicole froze. The paranoia she'd worked so hard to silence surged back. She scanned the street, checked the security camera she'd installed, reviewed footage. Nothing. But the letter meant one thing: someone out there still had secrets and they weren't finished. She took the note to Bill. He frowned, reading it twice. "Ted," he said immediately. "He's still playing games." But Nicole wasn't so sure. Ted had disappeared after their final confrontation. No one had heard from him. His overseas property remained untouched. His accounts were dormant. It was possible he'd gone underground. But it was also possible someone else had stepped into his shadow. A week later, Martin came home shaken. He said a woman had approached him after school. She said she used to know his mother, his real mother. Leslie. The woman hadn't given a name. She said she had stories about Leslie, about Ted. She gave Martin a small wooden box and told him not to open it until he was ready. Nicole opened the box that night while Martin slept. Inside were cassette tapes, labeled in Leslie's handwriting. There were 6 in total. She played the first. Leslie's voice came through, tired but clear. "If you're hearing this, it means I've failed to protect you. It means Ted won." The tapes were a confession. A memoir. Leslie spoke of Ted's manipulation, his control, his obsession with appearances. She described how he had begun grooming her when she was vulnerable, convincing her that the baby was their second chance, that Nicole would never have to know. But the relationship was never equal. Ted monitored her, isolated her, dictated who she could speak to. And then she mentioned the clinic. Not just for medical care but psychological experiments. Ted had been working with a private group, exploring behavioral inheritance. They believed that trauma and personality could be shaped in utero through high-stress conditioning. Martin, Leslie said, was their subject. Nicole stopped the tape, her hand shaking. She didn't want to hear more, but she had to. The 5th tape mentioned Kenny. Not as a villain but as the only person trying to get Leslie out. He wasn't blackmailing Ted for money, was threatening to go public. He wanted to get custody of Martin, not to control him, but to protect him. When Ted found out, he panicked. Nicole couldn't breathe. Everything she thought she knew twisted again. Kenny had been the only innocent one. Ted had fed lies to Bill. Manipulated Martin. Played Nicole. And Leslie flawed, frightened Leslie had died trying to do the right thing. The final tape ended with Leslie's voice cracking. "If Nicole hears this, I'm sorry. I should have trusted you." Nicole sat in the dark for hours. The next morning, she told Martin everything. She played the tapes. She let him hear his mother's voice. And Martin cried, not because of guilt but relief. He wasn't a monster. He was a product of abuse, of experiments, of lies he never asked for. Nicole made her decision. She compiled all the tapes, the documents, the photos, the timelines. She contacted a journalist, one she trusted, who had once written about mental health corruption. Within days, an investigative report was underway. When the story broke, it spread fast. The clinic was exposed. The program was dismantled. Other families stepped forward, victims of the same experiments. Ted's name was dragged into daylight. Interpol issued a warrant. Nicole and Martin relocated quietly. They moved to a coastal town where no one knew them. Martin changed schools. Nicole found work as a consultant in trauma advocacy. One night, a stranger knocked on their door. A woman, late 40s, kind eyes. She introduced herself as Mara, Leslie's half-sister. She had been estranged from the family for decades, but followed the case in silence. She wanted to meet Martin. Nicole hesitated. Then she let her in. Martin sat with Mara for hours. They talked about Leslie not as the victim, but as the artist, the dreamer, the sister who once sang lullabies in Spanish. Martin laughed for the first time in weeks. As Mara left, she turned to Nicole. "You saved him. Not by protecting him from the truth, but by telling it." And for the first time in years, Nicole believed it. The gates they had crossed through were still there behind them, looming. But they no longer defined the path ahead. They had chosen truth over silence. And that choice, finally, set them free.